Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us again for another coffee break video. My name is Natalie Fioravanti, and joining me today are Keith and Max. Keith is a director of incident response out of our Phoenix, Arizona office, while Max works in threat intelligence out of our Washington, D.C. office. Today, Keith and Max are going to be discussing cyber physical threats to small and medium-sized businesses, or SMBs. SMBs have been experiencing more threats recently, so let's get right into it. So Keith, what are some of the major losses an SMB may experience that would have an impact on the ability to operate at a functional capacity?
Well, Natalie, our world is run on emails and chats, text messages, Slack channels, Teams channels, all of that stuff. Our phones at the offices run on VoIP. They run on the internet. They don't run on twisted pair of wire anymore. So now imagine all that is gone. All of our communications, everything that we look at every day is gone. Chaos ensues. What do? How do you communicate your plan to your people? How do you communicate between each other to go ahead and get your systems back up and running? Most companies don't think about having these back channel communications. We may have to go old school, paper and notes, paper and pens. We got to get these phones up. We got to go ahead and start working on back channels. Those need to be in there, because if you can't communicate, you cannot recover. And if you can't recover, that means your money losses just keep piling and piling and piling. And next thing you know, they're piling up faster than snow in Minnesota in January.
Yeah. And more cases we see coming in, we find that our clients do not have an up-to-date incident response plan, or even a plan at all for that matter. Keith, why is it so important for a business to have an IR plan and to ensure it stays up to date?
Disasters cause chaos. Chaos is countered by good planning. You have to have a plan in place, and it has to be simple. I've seen plans for all kinds of different disaster recovery modes, from physical disasters, earthquakes, tornadoes, that kind of stuff, fires, to, hey, the lights went out and all the power's gone. And I've seen some that are, encyclopedias. You can't do that. It has to be simple. It has to be communicated to your teams. They have to know what it is. If you can't get that plan running because it's too complicated, it doesn't do you any good. So the plan stops the chaos. Stopping chaos means you get back in action, back to making money, back to your operations. And the last thing, you got to keep these plans in several places. You just can't keep them online. We depend on these computers so much, all these emails and everything else, right? You're going to have to take your plan. You're going to have to print it out old school, and you're going to have to put it in a 3-ring binder and put it on a shelf someplace. And then you need to make sure that it doesn't get dusted, that you keep updating it. So if all this digital stuff that we work on every time goes away, we still have that as a backup. You can grab it off the shelf and away you go.
Exactly. So Max, I have a question for you. Do you find threat intelligence to be useful for SMBs? For instance, if a company utilizes threat intelligence to identify vulnerabilities in their network through penetration testing?
Yes, absolutely. Threat intelligence operations and researching is risk management at its core. And whether you have a dedicated person or team in your organization who is spending the time to actively monitor, search, and hunt for malicious activity, relevant trends, or even interacting with the threats themselves if it's a threat actor to learn more information, all of that information and intelligence should be carefully considered to influence the business decisions. So when it comes to cyber physical threats or cyber physical threat intelligence, outsourcing to third-party physical penetration testers can be very crucial, as they will critically think of scenarios and methods to essentially weaponize and take advantage of physical aspects that you and your organization may not have thought about, when considering the entire realm. One example is you think that a 6-foot fence may be sufficient for to safeguard the perimeter of your business, but an 8-foot fence is actually more proper. So those are just simple scenarios that would be discovered from threat intelligence.
Yeah, and Max, one term that we hear a lot from businesses is, what would my annualized loss expectancy be for this event? Are you able to provide our viewers an overview of what annualized loss expectancy is and why it plays such an important role for SMBs?
Yes. So when placing together any incident response plan, it should always be prefaced with an inventory of the assets which are deemed critical and necessary to maintain the business operations. Like Keith said, when chaos ensues, you have to be able to track those assets. And the annualized loss expectancy is a quantitative risk formula that begins with assigning an asset value. and you calculate the exposure factor, which will give us the single loss expectancy. And so if we have an understanding of the chance that this will happen at a given rate per year, when you multiply those two factors, it'll give us the annualized loss expectancy. For example, a retail store would not implement a fancy state-of-the-art CCTV system for $1 million if it's only going to safeguard $10,000 merchandise, knowing that the chances to steal that merchandise once a year would be the most likely scenario. And in that case, the cost-benefit analysis would not really make any sense. So building the such annualized loss expectancy, requires the knowledge of your asset values and how they are at risk from a threat provided by the threat intelligence.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. Keith and Max, what are your thoughts on security awareness training for employees of SMBs? Do you find this effective, and what type of training do you find to be most successful?
Nelly, the best organizations train. They train for the worst, and that makes the easy problems go by quicker. Having the whole company know their roles, know what the risks are, and know the operations that are required to make sure that everything comes back into play is crucial to recovering from whatever threat you may be facing or whatever happened. Listen, when the military trains, they train everyone. So the bigger and larger scale that the training can be, the better. From the general down to the lowly private, everybody knows the roles, they know what's going on. And then in like special operations, take it a step further, where they know what each other needs to do. So say the communications operator goes down, somebody picks up that radio and they keep right on going. So not only having little small tabletop scenarios, but get everybody in your corporation involved so they see what is going to happen. And many of the incidents that we respond to, even when we respond on scene, people look at us like, oh, what's going on? Let them know what's going on and say, hey, the fixers are here. They're going to take care of business. And here's how you can help them. It's imperative that you train and that you get that training across the board to everybody in your company. Max, you got some stuff to add?
Yeah, absolutely. I really would just echo what your response and tie the knots about how training is applied in different scenarios, and mention that training awareness is fundamentally, the soft power to shift the culture and exemplify what's acceptable user behavior and practice, and just when things are calm and regular, not just when chaos strikes. And so this would, in the cyber physical realm, I should say, this can be an active security officer on premise should be able to know how to notice suspicious behavior. For example, if a stranger is taking continuous and unwarranted pictures of a sensitive facility, or if they're noticing an employee who is not thoroughly showing diligence to the physical security systems in place, that being the insider threat, such as allowing people to tailgate without swiping in, even though every employee is required to swipe in. And that would be a scenario of somebody getting socially engineered. So yeah, that's tying it all up together.
Yeah, it's the old, you see something, say something, and make sure that everybody in the organization knows that it's about everybody to, making sure that security is taken care of.
Yeah, definitely. Right. Well, Keith and Max, thank you for taking the time to provide all of this great information. And thank you to our viewers for watching today. We hope you enjoyed this video. If you haven't checked out the previous Coffee Break videos, please do so on our LinkedIn page. And feel free to reach out to the Kivu team if you have any questions or security concerns. See you all next week.